Hello and welcome to The People's View. My name is David Schoeneman. I'll be your host on the program today. On People's View, we take a look at all kinds of activity that's happening in and around the state and locally from a political perspective, but we try to take a middle-of-the-road, moderate perspective. We call it The People's View because we believe the views that we share here are views that people have at home, sitting around the kitchen table. These are the kinds of perspectives that they take, and that's what we try to do on the show. We're in the middle of summer, 2019. We've got a lot going on. Even though it's vacation time for most, there's still a lot happening in and around the state. So we're going to take a look at a couple of issues. With me today to talk about this is Carl Seidel. Welcome, Carl. Carl has been a former state rep, very involved in politics here in the state. Thanks for coming in.
You're welcome.
Now, this is unusual for me because whenever we've been on the show together,
right.
I've been there and you've been here because you've been the host of the show.
Well,
but I
it's a
appreciate
nice
the opportunity to
turnaround.
change seats. Right? So there is some big news going on. There's a lot of drama happening up in Concord over the budget. Just to recap, we had a budget that Governor Sununu proposed, and then we had a budget that the House Democrat, of course, Governor Sununu's Republican.
Right.
I would call him a moderate Republican, middle-of-the-road guy like the folks at home. That's why he's so popular, by the way. And we've got a Democrat-controlled House, Democrat-controlled Senate, and they came up with their response, which was vastly out of line with the governor's. And we sort of expected that because this is politics. And so the governor's budget, I think, was common sense. Democrats' budget was big spending that would require additional taxes. And the governor, predictably and wisely, vetoed that budget.
But widely expressed in funny ways. It wasn't straightforward that people could analyze it really easily.
Oh, really?
Well, you had fees, you had other charges that were put in there, and you had different things that they could propose where actually some of the bureaucrats controlled what the charge was.
I see.
So that's what made it harder.
A little sneaky.
Oh, well, they covered it well.
I see.
So
Governor Sununu wisely vetoed that budget, and he came up with a compromise. He didn't dig his heels in the sand or draw a line in the sand and say, this is the only thing we can do. Now, he did draw one line, which I think we can touch on, that I think is wise also. So he said there's going to be more money in the coffers, so we can increase spending. So this year's proposed budget is larger than last year's, additional spending. And there was some difference on where the money would be spent, but Governor Sununu has said, look, here's the extra money. You guys decide where you want to channel it. And it sounds like he's going to go along with that. But he drew the line at extra taxes and fees.
that's right.
Because Democrats' original proposal would have resulted in a lot of extra taxes.
Yes.
So where are we at now, and what are the next steps?
Well, you're waiting for somebody. They supposedly are getting together and talking, but I haven't seen anything. Every once in a while, you see an article in the newspaper, or the governor was down here in Nashua last week and talked to the audience on his state of the state. And he said that basically, I told him we can go up. This is the maximum that we're going to have for the budget. You can divide up according to the ones you want. One gets so much, and another gets so much, but the total can't exceed this amount, so that we don't have extra charges to the public. Now, he did take a couple of other things too. The people's leave, the family leave, allowed a bureaucrat to set the fee. I mean, it was started at 0.5% of your income. So that's an income tax. Oh, it was a fee, though. So it was labeled a fee.
I see.
But it was a fee for this insurance that is controlled by the commissioner of the whatever bureau it is that handles that. And that could go anywhere.
I see.
And
without legislative
approval, right.
Kind of a blank check given to this guy.
Right.
And my guess is that the 0.5% fee was probably known to be too low.
Right.
But it somehow maybe the Democrats thought that would sail through. But again, the moderate position, I think, is that folks at home, if we spend the money on taxes and fees, we're not spending it on car payments or co-pays for our health insurance or food for the table, because we can't spend the same dollar twice.
Right.
So the moderate position would say, look, we have this much money, that's how much you can spend, not beyond that, because we promised to raise taxes on the folks at home. We don't want to do that.
And the other little key to that family leave was it was mandatory for everybody. That was that was a benefit that the state was going to pay for them, and of course, whether you wanted it or not. You know?
So that's out of the budget. Out of
That's out of what the governor wants.
I see.
We'll see.
I see. We'll see what happens.
I mean, it's really going to be torn apart quite a bit. And the other part was the sales tax decrease that was scheduled. The governor said, "Fine."
Business tax increase.
The business tax.
Yes.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Not the sales tax. Business tax. And what he wanted to do, we were scheduled to have another decrease next year. He says, leave it as it is, because what the Democrats wanted, not only would they cancel the future decrease, they were going to go back to the old number that we had, and retroactively, which was going to be a constitutional question, whether they implemented something. So he says those are the two things that definitely weren't going to be in there as far as he was concerned. And then they could divvy up the things that they wanted to spend on extra things on mental health, on disabled children, and other things like that, all of which was in there, but they wanted a little bit more.
So now they have a chance to get a little bit more,
Yeah.
but it's not a blank check more. It's
not
if
as
you want
much
to
as
give
they
to
want.
these folks,
Right.
you have to take from over here. Somewhere you have to take.
This
from.
is the pot. It's not going to get any bigger.
Right. And I think that's what makes that's common sense. That's a
That's right.
common sense approach. That's how we do it at home. That's how the folks at home here in Nashville and certainly around the state do it. They look at what their annual income is and they say, okay, this is what we can afford to do. We're contemplating a vacation ourselves, and we contemplate the cost of the vacation versus the
Right.
cost of getting the car fixed.
Right.
It's just the way it goes. We can't
You don't plan on
manufacture.
spending more than you knew you were going to earn this year.
Exactly, exactly. And if we are forced to spend more on a car repair,
yeah.
that's going to have an impact on our vacation plans.
all
It's
right.
just
Right.
It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
These are standard. I mean, long-standing economic principles that are at play at home and around the state. So we're going to see what happens with that. We're going to watch that very carefully. I think the folks at home are going to be interested to know. There was an editorial, Dan Feltus, who's rumored to be possibly running for governor next year.
That's right.
A Democrat in the Senate, had an editorial. And how would you summarize that editorial?
Well, he tried to play on everybody's sympathies for things. But one of the problems I've had when I was up there is when they came up with wanting to spend more money, they really didn't outline the objectives that they were going to take care of with that new money. And they didn't have a way of testing their objective, to evaluating it. Because when you're in a business and you plan a budget and you go through the year, you're evaluating it at certain periods of time just to
Right.
make sure you're headed in the right direction, or
Right.
you want to tweak something, that you can change it a little bit. But all they want was the more money, and we've had problems when we actually had money laying on the table because we couldn't hire people fast enough or get them into an effective environment to do what they had to do.
So more money, promising more something, but without a measurable result.
That's right.
Again, that's not the way that most folks would do things, whether it's at home and certainly not in a small business. Most of the businesses, of course, across our state are small
That's
businesses.
right.
And any small businessman or woman listening to this right now would have to say, are you kidding me? I can't afford to spend money without
Right.
knowing
That's right.
whether it's
Well,
effective or
yeah,
not.
Right, right. And that's why the decrease in the business taxes meant so much to the state, and why we actually got more money than we were planning, because these small people were able to use that more effectively than the state could.
Yes, and that's the way it works. I
Right.
think there's far less overhead
Right.
in a small business than there is in the state. So if a dollar remains in a small business, they're going to get 95% of that
Right.
usage, let's say, as a round number. with 5% consumed in overhead. But if the state gets the money, it's probably a much larger number that gets consumed in overhead. 25%, who knows?
That's right. Yeah, it's mostly in labor for the state.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that comes along with a benefit package. So
Right.
that's always, we have a problem with our pensions too because of that.
Yes.
And that goes into another whole
Well, we got a
hullabaloo.
lot we can talk about. I just want to touch once again on the business tax reductions
Right.
that were put into play. And we talked about measures. And one of the things that was part of that legislation was that there was going to be a stepped decrease in this business tax rate over a period of time based on taking a measure at various points along
right.
the way. And if the measure hit,
Right.
we said, okay, we accomplished our goal. Okay, let's take the next step to reduce it. But if it didn't hit, then the reduction would not occur.
Right.
And that's very, very important. And that's clearly what's missing with the Democrats' proposal. Not only do they want to get rid of that,
Right.
where we have a measurable benefit that resulted from it, but they want to implement more spending without any kind of measurable metrics in there.
Or any kind of reason for why it wouldn't continue to do what it was doing, generating actually more than we had planned. So we were coming in with a couple $100 million extra each year for the last couple of years because the more people's businesses were more profitable. So
Well, again, I think the governor takes a moderate, reasoned approach to these things, and he says, look, the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So here he's looking at things that are either broken or not broken, and whether they're working or not working. If things that are working, let's keep that going that direction, and things that we have no measure for or are broken or not broken, let's not change things unless we have a reason to do so. There's a parallel story here we can touch on briefly, particularly the measurable aspect. There's an article in today's Union Leader, which I just want to share here briefly. Today is Wednesday, August 7th, and this was in today's paper, and the headline says, Nashua officials adopt new 5-year vision for city schools. And the objective, first off, it's a very big expense. We need 56 new people. They have 1,000 teachers roughly. I'm not sure how many employees total, but they want 56 more people. It's going to cost $3 million throughout the next several years, and it's to make us a standard of excellence. But there's no discussion of measurability. What is a standard of excellence that we're not meeting now? No mention of that. And what's going to be the measure of success for spending this extra $3 million? No discussion, no explanation. And I really worry about that because, again, do we want to just spend this money without knowing whether we're being effective? Apparently, the school superintendent pointed out that our budget, our personnel has gone down 6%. Our budget has never gone down, by the way. Our staff was decreased 6% over the last 10 years, but at the same time, our enrollment is down about 9%.
Right.
So our enrollment is shrinking like this. Expenses expenses are going up. Personnel, numbers of people employed goes down a slight amount, but this wouldn't make sense. We have schools that don't perform the way that they should. We have declining enrollment. We have increasing costs, and the way to fix all this is apparently to hire more people. I don't get it.
Well, I happened to be at the first meeting where they introduced it to the full school board, and it was. I'm trying to get an interview with the superintendent so I could get a little bit more detail on it. But what I heard there is there were more overhead people than teachers that were being added.
I see.
They were wondering about mental health more than they were the academic area. They wanted to make sure that, as one person put it, are happy. Our students are happy. Now, this bothered me in two ways. One, that I didn't like that presentation, but if that meant that they were not active, not being cordial or having problems with controlling the activity of the students, that meant that they didn't have discipline in the schools. And that bothered me since a couple of years ago, I did an interview with a substitute teacher who says it really is hell for a substitute teacher to go into a classroom that doesn't behave itself.
I can.
And I wonder if that's part of the problem, because there are going to be, I think, 6 or 8 social workers on his staff, which would just handle the social side. What do you want to do? We're supposed to educate the people, not control them into this be happy type of attitude.
Yeah, I think every parent wants their kids to be happy.
Yeah.
But what does that mean? And I'm a little concerned with spending more taxpayer dollars in that direction.
And that $3.5 million didn't include the benefits.
Right, I saw that. That's right. I think one of the quotes down here at the end, Doris Hohensee, who has been on a show with us before, and I think if I want to find out, kind of get an unbiased or a candid view of what's going on in the school board, she's my go-to person. She says, quote, "You have to get through the buzzwords and start looking at the details of this package." And she's really raising the question that, what's really going on here? Why are we doing this? Howard Kaufman, who's someone else I would go to, he says, quote, "This report is an example of writing a report and then justifying its conclusions." So it seems to me that there was a goal that was set, and that was to employ more people, maybe increase the budget, maybe increase the strength of the school department within city politics, which is a challenge for them in the face of declining enrollment, and maybe in the face of poor academic performance, which, we're in the bottom third of the state.
Yeah.
I've heard people say when I was on the Board of Aldermen, people come to Nashua for the excellence of the schools, and that's fine. I think people go to towns for the excellence of the schools. But if you can show me someone who says being in the bottom third of the state is an example of excellence, I'd like to meet that person. We should have him on the show to explain that. I don't think that's an indicator of excellence. So we need to really work on making things better, but have it somehow be measurable. And I think the charter schools measure it. I think private schools measure it, because that's how they stay in business. They're more like businesses. Charter school, of course, is public school, publicly funded, but they don't get the money unless they produce the result. And the result is good academics, because that's what the students there are looking for.
And their dollars per student is much lower than the regular student.
Yes.
The non-charter school student.
Again, I think that these points would resonate with the folks at home, because we don't want to spend our money on buying a new roof or getting something fixed without knowing that when the roof is fixed, it's not going to leak anymore. I mean, it's very important that we get value for the money that we spend before we go and spend it. So I'm concerned about this kind of thing.
Well, on top of this spending, we have 2 schools that need to be, one needs to be completely refurbished or replaced. We're talking about anywhere between $50 and $100 million just for maintenance and new facilities.
Well, I hope that they're contemplating combining schools, because in the face of decreasing enrollment, and the numbers are large, I think what was cited here is about 1,000 students less over the last few years. That's what's cited in the article. And I remember, again, in the Board of Aldermen, the number is about 2,000 over 10 years, let's say, maybe 15 years. But if you have a decrease of 2,000 students, we have about 11,000 students now, I think.
Round number.
But if we had 2,000 more, I mean, those are big numbers. To lose 2,000 students due to declining enrollment for whatever demographic reasons, maybe we don't need the same number of schools. And so if we're going to, I know they're looking at the middle schools. Elm Street Middle School is one, a beautiful old building, but it needs a little work. If we're going to do that, I certainly hope that the plan includes combining them. And frankly, the 2 high schools, there's North and South High School. I don't know if people realize this. It takes a long time to drive from north to south. But I'm a pilot. I fly out of Nashua Airport, and I look down, and there's North High School, and there's South. They're right next to each other.
Right, just
They're
a little
right
rivers
next to
in
each
between
other.
them.
Just a river, just a small river between them. They're right next to each other, and yet it's a long drive to get from one to the other. So it appears that they're far apart. But from the air, I mean, I'm telling you, they're right next to each other. So do we really need 2 high schools? I question that in the face of declining enrollment, and I would really question whether or not we need 3 middle schools in the face of declining enrollment. And certain efficiencies that are just occur based on scale. If you combine things, you're going to save some money.
Well, I lived in Chelmsford, Massachusetts for a long time, and we went through a cycle like that, where we actually were going to just make one elementary school. We're just going to I guess you'd say, pack it away for a while. But they were able to come up with a better idea. They turned it into a school, what would I call it? Watching the younger kids, before the preschool.
Oh,
I
really?
guess a
Oh.
preschool. And they rented it out to a agency that took care of that.
Wow, very
had
interesting.
people, and they used it quite effectively until the baby population, if you will, started increasing again.
That's a great way to do it. You don't want to just mothball it and close it down and shutter it because there's going to be
Right.
decay, with an
Right.
abandoned building. But if there's an alternate use, I think that's a good idea. I live close to the school in Ward 3. Why can't I think of the name? It's a beautiful old building.
Uh-huh.
And I'm drawing a blank.
The
on it.
Amherst Street School?
No, I live close to that,
Yeah.
but the one that's on Manchester Street, right where
Oh,
Concord
yeah.
comes together there.
Yeah, you got me now.
All right,
I
well, it's a
got it.
beautiful old building.
Right.
And I took a tour of that building, and it looks very much like the junior high school that I went to in New Jersey all those years ago, and just a beautiful building. And yet the student population in there is very small, and that could be a school that could one day maybe be closed. And I was thinking that there are charter schools around that I think may want to rent that space. And I think about the way the city rented space to that brewery.
Right.
That's in the old firehouse on down there by the library. I think it's $1 per year. Maybe it's $1 per year for 5 years, whatever it is. Then it goes to market rate. But if the city were to take that building and turn over maintenance to a charter school, but rent it out at a rate that would encourage a school to come in there, a little different model of a school, I think we might see
I
really
agree
some
with
wonderful
you.
things
Sure.
occurring there. And if that were to be the case, then the superintendent's goal of making Nashua an example of great education, I think could perhaps come to be. Because great education that relies on a one-size-fits-all is never going to be great education. I think there has to be an acknowledgement that not everybody's the same. And so if the city were to embrace rather than reject charter schools, I think it would be good for the folks.
I agree with you there. But, one form doesn't fit all in lots of things in life.
Yes.
And we can talk about that too when we get to healthcare too.
Sure.
But what I just thought about is take one of those smaller schools, teach it for the people who have another language as their normal language, and have it open at night and weekends for the people who want to perfect their English,
Great.
so that they do better in our schools, because I think that's one of the problems we have. We have
Right.
a lot of immigrants or people who are refugees from terrible areas, and they want to learn, but they have a hard time getting around to learning. Well, have this right in the center of town. Use a free bus, if nothing else, to get them there from wherever they live, and just use that for improving our adults as well as the
Yeah.
children.
Great idea. Well, Carl, you should run for the school board, I think.
I put in my 4 terms.
I know, it's hard. You've done a great service for the city, but I think that we need ideas like that on the school board. I think Doris and Howard raised
Yeah.
those, but when you have a situation, I think Howard's observation is probably accurate, where you have a solution that's now in search of a justification,
Right.
Rather than taking a look and say, what do we really need to do here? Your suggestion of expanding, letting these schools be open in the evening and weekends, whatnot, for those who want to perfect their language, great idea. And I think taking a school like the one we talked about earlier and maybe shutting it down from the regular public school and letting a charter school go in there, give them a favorable rent, $1 a year, something like that, to encourage it.
Yeah.
I think the community would be well served. Education in Nashua would be well served, and we can accomplish some of these stated goals in a measurable manner of making Nashua really a standard for excellence in education.
I think,
we
too,
should.
this is something that's not exactly what the governor had in mind when he sort of blessed this program before. See, it's coming down from the Department of Education, I guess, but I don't think it's the same objective or the same methodology that they had in mind. This is more a social type of education than it is a education.
Yeah,
type.
I would highly doubt that the governor would have endorsed something that just spent more money and
Right,
without measurable
right,
results.
right.
Because clearly when it comes to the budget, for instance, he's not supporting that, and he wouldn't support that in education either. But it's easy for things to get twisted when you get politics involved. And politics is about control and it's about money. And when money is involved this way, these are the kinds of things that
Right.
happen. And when there's a lack of lack of accountability, I should say, and basically an open checkbook, it's who knows what's going to happen. I don't think anything good is going to come out of that. All right, I see that we're nearly out of time here. Very briefly, tell us about the water. What happened with really briefly?
Well, with this chemical that's been contaminating several wells, not every town has a water company. They have private wells. But one was measuring the way, how much of the chemical was in the water. And they didn't wait until the federal government had a lower level than they have now. But what they did is the fiscal committee, looking at the regulations, or GELCAR rather, they told them that they wanted it in the parts per trillion, without taking into account how much it costs to measure parts per trillion. Parts per million is usually that's a factor of 1,000 different. And when you get down in the parts per trillion, you need sophisticated instruments, and you need a heck of a lot of ways of purifying the water with things that really don't cause a problem.
So rather than waiting for a number that made some sense, it just pulled a number out of the air. And that's like saying, well, I want my car to get 100 miles per gallon.
That's right.
Well, why not? In fact, if we demand it,
that's right.
Those manufacturers will make it give us 1,000 miles per gallon. It doesn't work that way.
No.
That's just not real life.
Right.
That's just not the world that we live in. So again, common sense, take a moderate approach. Let's think about these things before we come up with a solution.
And let's do it with science, not with wishes.
Imagination, yeah, with wishes. Yeah, good point. Well, thank you very much, Carl, for coming
You're
in.
welcome.
Great conversation.
Thank
I
you.
always enjoy this. Time always goes fast. I want to thank you folks, too, at home for listening in. My name is David Schoeneman. You're watching The People's View, and I'm here with Carl Seidel. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.